Underground influences.
Hello and welcome to Counterculture TV. I'm Lee Harris, and these are some notes on the underground. And by underground we mean counterculture. Well, it's hard to define counterculture. It is any opinions or movements or art that is against or different alternative to the mainstream culture. And there have always been alternatives. In the early part of the last century there were the Surrealists, and there were many interesting artists, thinkers and musicians who created new works of art and were Bohemians, because that's often associated with the counterculture, the Bohemians, or the people who lived in garrets and starved for their art and had different views to commerce and the prevailing monetary systems. And then after the Second World War, the movement seemed to come to America. In New York and San Francisco, their young people, or a group of young people in New York, met together in the late 40s, and they later became known as the Beat Generation. And they helped to form a sort of counterculture. There was Jack Kerouac, who wrote On the Road and set off a whole generation and more of young people who would go backpacking and travelling all over the world. There was Ginsberg with his angel-headed hipsters in Howl, and there was Burroughs with his wonderful junkie writings. And out of that movement sprung the Beat Generation, or Beatniks as they were known, and that's where I come in. I arrived in the UK from South Africa in the mid-50s to go to drama school, and here I came involved slowly into the peace movement, which is part of a counterculture. It was the beginning of C&D, Ban the Bomb. The first slogan and the first symbol was the peace symbol of the whole movement, and it broke out into many different areas. There were the artists and the people who grew their hair long and went on the road, and of course there were the musicians. And when the counterculture developed in the 60s, there were the Beatles, who especially with Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, ignited a whole psychedelic revolution and generation. And there was Bob Dylan, who right from the beginning into Blonde on Blonde created wonderful countercultural images, from On the Road to all the peace movements and the protest songs to beautiful psychedelic lyrics. And there were artists, many artists, and especially musicians, who created this wonderful mood. But that's going far into the 60s. But when I first came to London, there wasn't much counterculture movements, but there was an avant-garde. There was Goodge Street in London, where the junkies and the beatniks hang around. There was the Nucleus, which was a jazz coffee shop, and there were lots of all-night artists, and that constituted a bohemia. And then suddenly things changed in the 60s. There was a counterculture evolving, especially with the music. There were very interesting groups in the 60s. There was the whole mod movement with the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, and too much to mention. And it all became part of it broke the barriers, and hippies came from there, the rock festivals, and of course you cannot mention the 60s without the psychedelic revolution, the coming of LSD and cannabis and all sorts of things. And there was also the political movements of the 60s. There was the Black Power, there was the radical movements in Berlin Commune, the taking over the universities of the Sorbonne. There was the ideas of Chairman Mao. They were all alternative to the mainstream, or part of counterculture. But when we think of counterculture, we think of make love, not war. We think of gentle hippies and with flowers in their hair, and San Francisco, and it was a movement that ignited the whole world. And that's just a preamble, some ideas that are coming into my head and just thinking about it now. Because counterculture is about lifestyles. People became vegan and vegetarian, and went to India, followed Indian religions. So in just the brief notes, and during that period I was involved in many interesting alternative events, and I worked on stage at the Royal Festival Hall putting makeup on for Frank Zappa. I travelled to Stonehenge on a London double-decker bus with the Fugs. I sat in the Arts Lab with John and Yoko, cross-legged, and helped with the alchemical wedding at the Royal Albert Hall in 1968. I was with Ken Kesey and the Grateful Dead and some of the San Francisco Hells Angels when we were told to leave the Apple offices by George Harrison. I was part of the group of people that went to the Roundhouse and UFO Club. I was there with one of the first ever performances of the Pink Floyd at with the Hornsey College Sound and Light Workshop in Notting Hill, and then later at UFO. So the music scene, the communes that came out with the living together, all that is part of the counterculture. And I hope this first ramble of some of the images that are coming to me as I'm just sitting here will give you a nice introduction. I will tell you stories and anecdotes and why I think the counterculture is still important now. Thank you for listening to this first counterculture section. Thank you. In the late summer of 1968, it was a strange time altogether. The spirit of the time was rampant with discord and mayhem. Chairman Mao's little red book jostled with the embryonic reality of a cybernetic age. Angry anarchists vied with whacked out weirdos, reality freaks versus space cadets. Pass the liberation and blow your mind. We were on a freewheeling roller coaster veering from sexual liberation to spiritual upsurges, helter-skelter from drugs and rock and roll to macro